Welcome back to the Register's Report again. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. And we've done a very interesting thing here at PAC TV. We've actually taken a closing step by step and identified specific actions that happened during the purchase of a home. We started with a lender for a pre-approval letter. We then went to a closing attorney that talked about not only the importance of the purchase and sales agreement, but how careful you have to be now under current law with even the offers. We then had a realtor who talked about their process, much of whom we've had before in the show. And most recently, I had a home inspector that talked about the importance of having a home inspection prior to buying a home, basically so you know what you're buying. In this segment of the show, I have a longtime guest for me and great friend, Shaun Fitzgerald of Fitzgerald Appraisals. And I just wanted to talk, Shaun, about the role of the appraiser in the purchase process.
Glad to help.
Yeah. So I know that in order to get a loan on a home, it has to meet certain standards.
That's correct.
You want to describe how that starts?
Typically, well, by law, by federal law, the appraiser is engaged only by the lender.
Okay.
So a homeowner can call me and ask to have the property appraised, but then they can't take that appraisal to a lender
Okay.
and shop it, so to speak. What was happening many years ago was people were trying to find an appraiser who'd come up with a high value, then they'd go from lender to lender looking for a low interest rate, and that's no longer allowed. So
Okay.
the first step is that the lender, or something called an appraisal management company, contacts us and asks us if we're interested. Typically, we've been vetted ahead of time to make sure that we're familiar with the geography, familiar with the market, and are willing to accept the assignment at the quoted fee. So most appraisers who do this type of work are called fee appraisers.
Okay.
And they do it on a job-by-job basis. If it's waterfront property, that fee is going to be higher. Or if they're very busy, that fee is going to be very, very much higher. But the market has slowed down a little bit. Appraisers are a little less busy, so in some cases the fees are falling slightly. And another important consequence is that the time it takes to get the appraiser out to inspect the property is shorter than it was
Okay.
a year and a half ago.
Has technology changed in terms of how you do your job?
It has dramatically changed.
Yeah.
In the old days, we had a personal relationship with all of the lenders we worked with, mostly because it was a geographic business. It still is geographic, but the larger lenders, and in particular the larger appraisal management companies, also called AMCs, might be in Butte, Montana, and they'll send us a request, and we'll respond, and we jump through a few hoops. They make a few documentation notes, and the process starts. Once the process starts, the technology is pretty impressive.
Yeah, so what are your first steps in terms of analyzing the property's value?
Thank God for the Registry of Deeds.
Okay.
First thing we look at is the deed of the current property owner, and the next thing is typically two things. We look at what's called the property record card from the assessors, and often we get to that property record card by going through a GIS system.
Okay.
So the state of Massachusetts has something called Mass GIS, and then each individual community is likely to have a GIS that will show me a map of the area, and I can zoom in or out on it.
Sure.
It will point me to that assessor's property record card And some of them, it'll point me towards the deed. And if not, I can get what's called the book and page, which is in the registry. I can get that from the property record card. And then with these GIS systems, I can put layers in and see if the property is in the proper zone, residential, commercial, agricultural. I can see if there are wetlands on the property. I can see if there are water, sewer, gas lines in or near the property. And then there are things, some of the more sophisticated cities and towns have documentation on whether there was ever an underground storage tank for oil in the old days. The next step is to schedule the appointment. And working with these larger organizations, they want to know as soon as you've made the phone call, as soon as you've scheduled the appointment, when the inspection will take place and who will be doing the inspection.
So that's an on-site inspection?
Yes. There are what are called drive-by appraisals. I'm not comfortable with them, but Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, are your customers familiar with those?
Yes.
Yeah. Your watchers. They have certain guidelines where they will allow a drive-by appraisal and where they won't. I like to see the interior and the exterior, and that's pretty much expected. It's been expected in the appraisal profession for many, many, many years. But as technology evolves and record keeping gets better and better, there's more confidence that you can rely on older pictures and in many cases, we look at the listing from the multiple listing service that the realtors use, and there are 10, 20, 40 photos of the interior.
Yeah. And how do you get your comps, your comparable?
Well, the next step is to look for comps. As a matter of fact, when we're ready to make the inspection, we probably have already selected most of the comparables. And the reason for that is that we select it typically based on location, style, age, size, and condition.
Okay.
So if we're looking for a 3-bedroom colonial with a 2-car garage, we search for that through the computer, through MLS, and look for that. And then when we go on the date of the inspection, we can look at those comparables, at least from the exterior, and it's one stop.
You compare the differences between the properties.
Correct. Yeah, and we might take the exterior photos before or after the inspection, but the inspection is what takes the most time on that day.
Okay.
There's an awful lot of desk work where we're comparing the exterior photo with what we think was the condition of the property at the time of sale. We try to make those comparable examples as close in time to today, to the day of the inspection. There are rules, again, from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, but we can't always follow them. In a very slow market, sometimes we have to go more than 6 months back or further than 1 mile away.
Wow.
And those are just a few of the rules.
So typically from the time you're awarded the work till the report is completed, how long does that take?
With everybody cooperating, sometimes that can be done in 3 days.
Okay.
Often it takes 2 weeks or more.
So what do you mean everyone cooperating?
Well, if you call the homeowner and they say, I can't be there because I work, and can you come on the weekend? Well, we work on the weekdays and really don't want to be available on the weekends. As a matter of fact, a lot of appraisers who are very busy spend the weekends doing the typing and data entry,
the reports,
and all that sort of thing.
Wow.
Right. They reserve the daytime hours during the week for inspections.
So I know over the years I've had you and my friend from Abington, Gary Minahan, come on and talked about different changes in the appraisal world over time with different restrictions and different responsibilities. Have any of those come about recently?
In the process, not dramatic changes. The basics go back to the 1920s,
Okay.
before the Depression. But people could see it coming, and we saw a lot of changes. We follow something called the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. Short name is USPAP. And those standards were written down in the 1980s, before there was a big recession in late 1980s. Appraisers saw it coming, bank regulators saw it coming, and then it happened again, a lot of updates prior to 2008 recession.
Right after the problems in 2003 and 4 and
Correct.
yeah,
Correct.
to fix those problems.
Yes, and we might see it coming today, but what there's been strong emphasis on lately, and this is kind of an advertisement for the appraisal profession, is the appraisal profession is not very diverse. Mostly old white men. And in many cases, we are in a second career. Appraising requires judgment. You get that, hopefully you get that as you age, as you have more experience. But it's a business that fluctuates back and forth based on the number of transactions. So if there aren't a lot of sales, there aren't a lot of opportunities for trainees to get the experience they need. We are an older, whiter profession because a lot of appraisers come up through the ranks with family members and friends.
Okay.
And we're trying to change that from the federal level down.
So possibly realtors moving forward to that field, that training.
Yes.
And you do CEUs. We've talked about that before too.
Yes, we have a continuing education requirement, and but that's very important. But what's more important in getting more people into the profession is that we have a minimum of 45 hours of education just to become a trainee. And then I believe it's 180 hours to become
good amount,
an
yeah.
appraiser. And that's education. I have a certified general license, which allows me to do commercial and industrial properties as well. That takes 240 hours. More importantly, though, as a barrier to entry to the profession, we have 2,000 hours of actual monitored appraisal experience with a professional appraiser, and then 3,000 hours for the commercial. And they're trying to reduce that, possibly by allowing experience as a real estate agent, or as a home inspector, or as a title examiner, or as even a contractor who knows what it costs to build a property or to renovate it.
Yeah. So when you've reached your final report and come to your conclusion, how do you actually sign off on it under my best, under pains and penalty perjury, under my review, or what is the language that you usually use?
Well, there's a
What
I
clause,
think it's probably
I should
a
say.
12-point certification
Oh, wow.
that says that you've inspected the property, that you've read the deed, that you have no present or contemplated future interest in the property or the people involved with the property, that you've maintained your continuing education credits and that your license is current. And that's about half of them.
Yes.
And then we sign and give our license or certification number issued by the Commonwealth.
So there's ethical and business
Yes.
language in there.
Yes. These standards, the USPAP, are they're pretty open to someone who wants to do a good job. But before they start enumerating what the specific standards are, they start with ethics, experience. Am I competent to do the job? And you have to express in the report that you are competent, you are experienced, and that you have no bias.
Well, thank you for taking the time to join our show. For anybody that's been following the track of presentations relative to purchasing a home. I know they're learning something because I learn something every time I talk to you.
I think the greatest thing about being an appraiser is every day is a learning experience.
Right, that's great.
And I enjoy it.
Well, thanks, Shaun. Yeah.
Glad to help.